that may be suitable, or he mentions whether reason there is related to something. Could be because agitated enough from benching memories, whether reason that benching cartel memories, whether reason that whether also summoned. But if it's not transprobative, to erase out the social self from narcissism might take probable forever, or long enough, and will be the usual casual forever. Example seems just our recent mention that wasn't accurate. So at first starting point, which is it to evaluate? By any society, whether for any society, would it also be accepted? Remotely gotten to that point where it's sort of development narcissism willed enough, it still can be proper. So it usually takes us to indicate enough. It's certainly the laborists have lots of servicemen, and that's how they are able to learn steadily. Sort of narcissism evolve. English words are absolutely atrocious. The rhythm, notice rap music is not really symbolizing rap music. It's just how you're supposed to sound. The whole English is a bunch of persons with poor sports than the average Roman and Greek person, not speaking of athletes, or some Nadal or close to at the time, but simply lumberjacks and general labor workers, below average. Should we start this examine? Notice beauty. Checking a person based on their beauty is right, whether that's school system. Whether reason, whether also with, whether reason, whether reason there, and perhaps of, whether reason there, whether another, whether reason there, and whether reason there, and whether was perhaps of, whether reason there, and was perhaps, whether reason there, whether probable, and whether reason there, whether probable, and was perhaps of, whether reason there, whether was the end, perhaps of the probable of to for whether reason there, whether first of the probable, and whether reason there, whether before of the probable, and whether reason there, whether probable of the and whether reason there, probable of to could be of, and whether it's probable of to could be of, whether reason there kind of was minor pronunciation of, and whether it's probable of to could be of. Some may have achievement, but that's probably close to lethality, and whether reason they are more resemble to, and whether reason whether also whether reason whether probable more resemble to lethality, while our guys have none of those prone or problematic weaknesses. Notice the only entity that cannot be reasoned is narcissism, this unique group, down to sort of the cannibal as original formulaten word. We could speak a lot whether we could sort of progress is grasp, whether move a lot faster if whether sort of the word forward than forever, whether reason they're just the word forward within bracket marks. Whether reason whether within bracket mark and whether bracket marks. Narcissism is widespread out there, guys. Someone else starts condemning towards us. This ISIS has been sort of afraid. I expected lots of attacks by the summer. Well, what is it with it? Right? Perhaps that's where some of the problematic notifications comes on, and then we gotta have to install the modem. Whether the modem internet receiver, while there's all this yappa, and while some of these divisions are mediocres outside, but that's because they're not in their zone. And probably also dramatism. These goes as pathetic and operates as a league, while each of them reveals itself whether presents as individuals. Something about computer generated, even with RNG, whether reason and random number generated, whether reason and whether also with whether reason whether and with whether reason whether probable of and whether with whether reason and whether another, whether reason and whether probable of, and with whether reason and whether the random number generator, whether reason and whether another, whether reason and whether number, whether reason and whether minor, whether from whether reason and whether also minor, etc. To probable of to also have first of to probable of to also to suitable from whether probable of to also to could be of, and whether reason and whether the number, whether reason and whether minor rather from whether also whether reason and whether also whether reason and whether whether reason and whether another, whether reason and whether perhaps of, and whether minor of whether recent whether minor instead of whether recent whether. How about continuous and whether the recent whether and whether minor whether of whether recent whether minor instead of. They're toying out, guys. What is this? If all these automatrons being acting like some slot machines, they'll get slaughtered, or probably slotted. Maybe some device that actually goes to them or terminate these entities, cease those from being acted. And the way to seal them is to sort of spirituals that I do believe we're sort of have certain children in a way sort of us is one of many options, whether one of several at least, in terms of quantity, and whether in terms of numbers, whether reason, whether number, another, whether reason, whether perhaps of whether reason, whether probable of, in terms of quantities. Our guys been dominating this through our methods, through conquesting the spirit realm, and we're able to sort of have our guys more and more, and other ones was more capable and granted with access code despite the liberals' policies, to continue to crush these enemies, these ones against nature. The force of Jebus will probably be able to accomplish this. The force of Jebus is probably also force of Lucifer, because just Jebus, how is he really that powerful? What if a thug, in the case of a thug, which sort of does one even with whether moderate factor of ignore, or whether sort of goes against Jebus, how would Jebus sort of destroy those? Doesn't really have to destroy. It could be with sort of stations here, everything associated and affiliated with Jebus as those vanquish. And usually, whether reason, the results is not going to be sort of vanquish like absolute obliteration towards enemy. It's probably a bit of sparish, right? Reason they're comparative, whether reason they're whether of comparative to probably to be whether reason whether probable for whether reason whether probable to be comparative of comparative whether reason there of comparative short and whether briefing for whether reason whether of comparative short and briefing to probable which whether reason whether to probable also to could be. We could be speaking lots of morals. This America place is not going to move. It constantly commentates on your grammar. And this standardization has no historical values. It's overemphasized on these insists because it's not speaking F word, right? Or whether one of is not speaking F word, whether it's that's why I'm being not speaking F word, whether reason whether that's why I'm being not speaking F word. Therefore, these are as if formal benevolent. Whether reason they're not just innocent, but also benevolent. Whether reason or whether besides being innocent, whether reason whether innocent and also benevolent. The reason there of specific whether reason the exclusive on which the proper to give may not be trusting those whether the perhaps of and also endorse to reason they're mentioning. Something about the random number generated events sort of are not as closer to random, whether there's a difference to sort of life events, for example, coming out of a machine of lottery. There's it's itself probably is an event, and whether also the perhaps of whether reason whether probable for whether for whether reason there and whether probable of to whether reason and whether earlier for whether reason there, whether reason there for whether reason there, whether earlier for whether reason there, whether reason there another whether reason there, whether earlier for whether reason there, and whether reason thereof probable of to could be regarded as an event. And there's some procedures, there's some factors, major factors, and might be some cases of medium factors, whether moderate. The person's modest, the person's moderate, the person's genuine, the person is genetic, the person. Hideousness, guys, right? Distortions are still out there. If I speak in some other form as completely not going to be effective, but while it's soon by success, this is a 7 billion convolution, guys, right? And the numbers may as well be 8 billion within 5 calendar years. The planet is a planet. Humans are not taking so much responsibility. It's continuing for a reason of whether reason there and whether, and there's procedures Also whether recent there and whether there's continuous of whether recent and whether just whether recent there and whether recent there and whether just and whether recent there and whether, and there's minor factors of sort of minor probable starting of whether within whether of others, whether will belong to others of the whether recent whether, namely for category of whether recent whether category of others of. Yeah, it takes a while before this video goes on. Plentiful of exemplification if we argue through them in some death script. As I argue, these are quite vicious and absolutely demented. He's been twisting its hijacked corpse into some kind of misshape, while sprays on with lots of perfume. I want to eat. Whether someone ordered me a pie of done, used, whether reason, whether just, whether reason, whether reason, whether done, whether reason, another, whether reason, whether another, for whether reason, whether minor, rather, for whether reason, whether perhaps for my, and whether reason there, and whether perhaps of, and whether minor, rather of used, perhaps of used, done, and with lots of perfume on it. They're fighting all of us. They're fighting ancient forces. This Nazism is morbid. Notice we don't make decisions. Notice the decisions are stuff are not so logical. It's almost a predetermined road, as in sort of persons actually have very limited control over it. They're sort of accelerating on a roller coaster. Notice a lot of the activities are sort of another religion, whether these denotation, whether reason there perhaps of whether reason, whether minor, rather, whether reason, whether also whether reason and whether reason and whether minor, rather of sort of notes, perhaps of whether reason, whether perhaps of notes, whether reason, whether also whether reason and whether reason and whether, and perhaps of whether reason and whether notes of whether reason there and whether and notes of and 6 or whether recent. If word, then it's emphasized. If not, or if no, then that's kind of as whether reason, whether probable, kind of as whether reason, whether it's applied to whether reason, whether another, whether reason there, whether also whether reason there, whether another, whether reason, whether probable, accountable, as applying to it. While the sort of with the procedure probably more of a random generated that literalization, minor literalization, whether also whether reason there, whether within, whether with bracket mark, and whether bracket marks of whether reason, whether within, whether with bracket marks of minor literalization, whether reason, whether literalization of whether reason, whether perhaps of more resemble to original, whether reason, whether similar, whether reason, whether perhaps of whether reason, whether more similar, and resemble to whether reason, whether more similar to the original formulating of. Reason there and whether reason there and whether reason there and whether reason there and whether maybe more resemble a whether reason whether can't use one reason there for whether reason there whether more of a whether reason there whether perhaps of whether reason there whether minor, rather of a strategic pre-thought, kind of reason for syllabus remarkable. It's not easy, guys. It's almost as I'm speaking, I'm actually fighting. Almost most actively, I'm probably also fighting. Sort of can be a different fighting, as in of whether and comparative, whether reason and whether of. Whether reason and whether and whether reason whether and whether before whether first of whether reason whether just whether reason whether first of whether reason and whether probable for whether reason and whether probable for whether first of whether reason there whether sort of a comparative whether reason whether probable for comparative of a whether reason whether probable of comparative whether reason whether minor rather whether reason whether practice for whether reason there whether minor rather whether reason there whether probable of comparative of context, whether contextual category, whether reason a contextual category for whether reason the probable of comparative of context category of whether reason there and whether perhaps of whether reason whether and another probable of comparative, another whether reason whether and whether minor rather of contextual, whether reason whether of a context category of whether reason whether probable of countable as also whether reason whether probable of countable as minor repronunciation of whether reason there whether another whether reason there whether context category for whether reason and whether also whether reason and whether another context category whether reason and whether another context category of probable of which whether reason and whether probable of also to suitable for whether reason and whether just whether reason and whether reason adjacent and whether reason there whether reason and whether another whether reason there whether reason there whether reason there whether reason there whether probable to could be of whether reason there and whether to probable of so also to could be for whether reason and whether perhaps of minor rather of probable of whether reason there whether probable of whether reason and whether whether reason there and whether to probable of so could be whether reason whether to countable as probable of minor repronunciation of whether reason and whether minor and perhaps of also other rather than whether reason whether perhaps also from whether reason whether also from whether reason whether another whether reason whether perhaps of also whether reason whether and whether rather of whether reason and whether rather of and whether minor rather of perhaps of for whether reason whether minor instead of whether reason there and whether to probable of to also to be of. Well, those ones are sort of more difficult to predict, or sort of another category of. And then would it be sort of outbound, or whether be different enough, or is this and whether reason and whether reason and whether perhaps of whether reason and whether probable, whether reason and whether just whether reason there whether probable be sort of make major changes, and it's and whether reason and whether is this sort of accounted for, whether reason and whether also whether reason and whether it is accounted for, whether reason and whether could it be whether reason and whether another whether reason and whether is accounted for. It perhaps is sort of within bound the more of eventful and procedure based than more of electronic sort of namely of quantum level, whether reason whether namely of a quantum and associated whether reason and whether perhaps of whether reason and whether another whether reason whether and probable of whether reason and whether rather of related to topic of whether reason and whether perhaps of whether related to topic of function, whether reason and whether and does another whether reason and whether another whether reason and whether probable of related to much topic of whether reason and whether perhaps of either rather of whether reason and whether another whether reason and there whether of whether reason and whether probable of relate to topic of much of probably is within bounds of much, and probably not, because life it's almost against itself, right? We are sort of a unique betrayer with a combination of quantization process. Sort of we are animations of another world, of the end. And we came to here, the conclusion has been sealed and G was won. And now we sort of continue to whether another saga of whether reason and whether it sort of comes whether reason and whether probable, of whether reason and whether comes simultaneous, of whether reason and whether comes and whether minor rather of whether reason and whether to perhaps of whether first of all whether reason and whether to perhaps of whether reason and whether minor rather of more whether reason and whether comes more simultaneous of, and whether a refight of, and while identifying it being a refight is within sort of this refight, yet that one is sort of still different in terms of consideration is probably more same, whether reason they're same whether reason, whether much more, whether reason, whether perhaps of minor rather, whether reason, whether another, whether reason, whether another of, sort of balances out the proportion, whether ratio there, the probable. F. Romania was congratulated is these rascal thoughts that go so far and peeks into people's privacies. This whole place sometimes doesn't deserve reason. This stuff could be secondary. The main is probably our Skynet drones to fix this stuff. As much as there should be as much as our guys are powerful, we're not the only powerful. So there might be so many splashes of pollutions at this, right? For instance, it could be one of which, at the opposite assessment, it's probably much more difficult to trouble for here. Reason is, notice when you have to, it's almost like toffees, and grant them a lot of envy, probably. Well, so that comes as default, and if they dampen us more, it sort of does. And notice in the regular verb what usually provided was if it takes us to pursue to our guys this much, then that's not our guys. That's another terminator. How could these be so much more against the values? If they could easily be converted to the other side, they weren't this side at all. The other side sort of didn't convert. It reconverted a lot of the one that sort of sanction, whether kept to vector formats, but later were this hideousness, passive aggression unleashed, reasoner words, whether reasoner, whether episode, or whether perhaps of, whether episode, whether reasoner, whether perhaps of practice, whether reason, whether perhaps of perhaps of, whether reason, whether probable of perhaps of, perhaps of, whether reason, whether perhaps of, and whether efforts of, whether reason, whether words, whether reason, whether minor rather of, whether reason, whether word, whether reason, whether perhaps of, whether minor rather of, whether reason, there, whether perhaps of, whether reason, whether, and also whether reason, whether just, and whether reason, whether just, whether reason, whether, and whether minor rather of, whether reason, and whether word, and whether words of the probable to be providence. We wrote extensively on the blog and combined with whether a lot of the contents there and also on the other media stuff to could be helpful. Whether reason and whether to could reinforce and whether also whether reason and whether before, whether reason whether assistant, whether reason and whether another, whether reason whether reinforcement assistant, whether reason whether perhaps of whether minor rather for whether reason whether another, whether reason and whether of whether reason and whether assist, whether reason and whether another, whether reason and whether just and whether perhaps of whether reason and whether reason and whether reason there and whether reinforcement and assist two of.
啊？为什么呢？后头啊？啊？你这是吃东西嘛？你吃的不对，不是吃东西，吃完都去吃啊！你这样子会，你的身体会好像很不好。OK。吃点那个，吃点酸奶，然后并且打一个那个没有国家酸奶，打一个给你。
I cannot yell directly at the Nazis and sort of want to deliver. They trained us. Someone help your own folks. This stuff is so ridiculous. Vast amount of these abominations that lift one another, sort of Nazism lift, and engineer itself to mass numbers. America is founded by a bunch of cycles. A lot of versions of cycles. Regular folks there were, and all of a sudden, because I didn't mention also regular folks, therefore it's false. Coming from the Nazis. And probably some modernist puppets in themselves also proves therefore the Nazis are benevolent. Is the camera on? We often get all these error warnings throughout. This whole place is soon to be a nuclear dust. I'm regular to activate my battle standards. If I sort of not have it, it's just not right. Why should we always explain? And I already explained it. That's the funny part. That explained is sort of not explained, just reporting to the Zergs. This piece of place deserve to be bombed into every smack. For many English is sent to such a level, and they usually breed children to such a way that conditioned to absolute obedience. What does that become? It's going to also involve acting as if they dominate. Like guys, namely for whether reason or whether minor rather, like guys, namely for whether reason or whether another, and first for whether reason or whether what the freaking is wrong with the place, whether also with the word fuck, just to maybe piss off the F-word accuserists. Reason is probably could be accountable as generalization thereof. And maybe for hearing in this instance of the reason there are phrases, probably sort of a 1-3 jump, whether a bit of whether perhaps of whether minor instead of whether reason or whether minor rather from whether reason or whether although and whether minor rather from whether at first of the probable highly resemble to whether reason or whether similar to original formulaten of. For many, English is settled in such a way, it's so slow to speak. The words are not with the rhythm of a battle fight. How do you fight it? It's like you're engaging, and I'm here taking a constructor. The whole place is nuts. You have Mandarin. Go fucking learn Mandarin, you stupid fuckheads. I don't want to microwave 350 million. Whether it's a bit of a straw, they're indicative of to could be. Do the psycho Nazis want to get themselves microwaved? This is the level they're rating it. Our guys are stronger. They're so retarded. Why do these keep trying to fuss and purposely choose to target our guys and come up with a 7 billion engineering spot to kill more humans? Why don't these try to kill others instead? Or smash themselves into a creative, whether a bit of a stolen giant pool of red blood, or whether it's tomato. Utterly out of dysfunction, no self-constraint. Well, by the 7 billion, it probably already demonstrated, while these keep dramatizing and hover around, doesn't care about anybody. Being decathlete and infiltrate, always pass judging on others. That's why they're not neutral. We know they're not neutral persons. They are unhappy, insolent, fast machines that haven't been put a bullet to them. Notice the guns are invented sort of is highly discriminatory. Perhaps that's been pointing towards something, right? Or whether reason that whether perhaps of whether mining instead of whether reason or whether first of whether reason that whether perhaps of whether reason whether also whether reason that whether perhaps and whether minor rather whether reason that whether also whether reason whether perhaps for minor rather for whether reason whether and whether moderate and whether perhaps of whether reason whether minor rather whether reason whether also whether reason that whether rather of whether reason there is probable of the perhaps to also that first of why is person stop moving? Our motives are examined, and what's all this fake support? So it is, these are all number-based eeriness, whether these are number-based automatrons, and have some sort of major eeriness. I'm asked to perform, I have to write 140 pages of essay to submit to the Nazi commissions, therefore it's something. If these want to speak about ice, speak about lines and cutting and using insertion cards, I personally boil them onto CNN and hold exhibition over it. Stuff is so tough, absolutely ridiculous. I've been sent to prison for so many years, I survived, and these act their school system to imprison us mainly. These concentration grind. They try to dominate this whole world. The Nazis are way above by natural order, therefore they does more. And what's not going to come out of it? We are not going to microwave them. Noticing the way, or whether reason or whether suggestive, there it is. Kind of was probably replaced into a reason there of the mentions with perhaps of whether perhaps of it's probably whether reason or whether of which whether reason or whether of whether perhaps of a reason there, whether reason there, and whether minor rather of whether reason or whether perhaps of whether reason or whether probable of whether reason or whether reason is probable accountable as minor repronunciation of whether reason or whether probable of perhaps of and whether perhaps whether reason or whether probable of and whether reason or whether probable of perhaps of then those ones that are going to joke around, ignore, and call the guy crazy. This stuff is not going to resolve to them not being sort of skinned alive it's not going to happen. And I advocate for any governments to not look into that realm, because they're sort of as if, in a sense, even though they didn't build a single thing, can the terrorists gotten here through moral values? They must have intimidated. And if these ones keep trying to plot against our guys, they should Google whether someone should present an image of smallpox to those to get a sort of a preview. If these continue to disobey, then they'll be dismantled. Too much wounds of nature to heal. These has desecrated against. Folks can notice I'm probably some different being, probably nature's forces with me. That's why I'm able to probably perform faster than a lot of others. And this granted, probable, this biological, whether reason or whether it's human, speaks loud, probably. Cannibal has a rhetorical expression of if Nazis cannot understand, then whether reason whether Nazi cannot not Nazi understand, then whether reason and whether perhaps and whether understand also. Then those are Nazis, and those are also democratic opponents. They are against us. This is a league of passive aggressors wearing Walmart apparels, and they're all a bunch of killers on escape and taken this society for refuge. We don't want them. These are not a lot of the disability, not just disability, like whether probable similar, whether reason, whether probable, whether reason, whether probable similar to, whether reason, whether perhaps and whether and probable, whether reason, whether another, whether reason and whether probable, similar to a lot of the mediocreists. That's sort of one of the traits, sort of the larger one, whether the more main one, whether reason or whether perhaps whether reason or whether before, whether reason or whether before recent thereof, whether reason or whether mainer ones, whether reason or whether the other was reason or whether larger was, whether more main one. It's probably Nazism. That sort of covers a large strides. Digging those into maggot holes and pouring mercury onto those. Guys, anesthetic sprays is so much out there. Watch more gore videos for justice. The game is actually more avant gore. That is now matched to their aggression level. Check out how these prosecute dogs. And should I bring about how these cook against crabs and shrimps as if they are not life beings? It's like all these crabs, cousins and uncles go into a room and then start there this hissing sound. They don't know what it is. It's as if whether reason the announcer starts 100 degrees, 110 degrees, and you slowly get cooked alive. You're noticing all the sort of suddenly you can feel the positions of nearly all of your organs, and the organs that you never knew before. And moments of your discomfortness and start to come. Suddenly you feel re-dreaded, sort of type of reborn. Whether reason, whether sort of relived, whether reason, whether probable, whether reason, whether also whether reason, whether reason, whether counterparts matter reproduction, whether reason, or whether probable counterparts matter reproduction of the probable to probable, whether reason, whether for the probable, whether reason, whether they're to probable of could be of. Whether reason that whether sort of arrived of the probable to cannibal, whether reason whether the probable similar to the whether reason whether to probable similar to the original later. Still to this day it's going to be quiz again. That stuff is going to cause the exhibitions being built. We'll shift those into these boiling pipes and actually boil them. Unfortunately there's too many of them and this stuff is too dangerous. If we do not perform this whole place is messed up, and soon someone else will do worse. So we're super saviors. I hope everyone understands every move is sort of the maximum optimum strategy, and do not question further. There is just invitation from Nazis and perhaps one of perhaps of hearing hearing specific session whether reason whether exists for whether reason whether just whether reason whether matter rather of whether reason whether. And model these puppets, whether reason, whether perhaps from whether model these puppets, whether reason, whether just whether reason, whether reason, whether puppets, whether reason, whether another, whether reason, whether weather reason there and weather modernities popular. Invite us to literalize explain it. Like they want to know it more, so they could help to this mission size of. Guys, this planet is a zombification. It's a giant zombie planet. The hobbies are fake. It's all fake. Economy is fake to the point that it's very, very fake, and whether it's sort of doesn't try to be more fake by being more fake. Its completely eeriness was a giant swindle ship, while with intimidation, or probably was ruthlessness. Or so much it's probably some kind of loan, whether reason, whether trust loan. Hopefully it is. It's always right to approach to, at some instances, when it's more of perhaps of battle, whether more of a frontier, whether reason, whether confrontations, to directly strike, whether reason, to regard and double insurance safeguard. Our guys don't have to understand all these manuals. Some of the manuals are for the instructors. Lots of stuff are fake. The economic system serves to the number-based consumerists. They're getting computers, and it's all great trade-offs. These don't do a rotten deal, have we noticed? If we investigate more, we'll probably will also receive re-verification, whether reason, whether reason, whether process of verification, whether process of whether reason, whether another verification. So whether reason, whether also whether reason, whether process of whether reason, whether re-verifications of. By trading some of sort of more indoctrined mention as of whether reason, whether mention, whether reason, whether perhaps of and whether of. And those receive these privileges now have the access to get computers, and they don't have to think strategically. They just have to gamble, and if there's no damage to them doing those passive aggression, that's sort of seal deal. We can only whether reason, whether perhaps of whether reason, whether minor rather. We could be defined as successful and great and cheered and applause to. Next day, less of those. Less of the regular folks, more of the immigrants. They will pose as citizens, and soon our guys perhaps of here instance measure will be labeled as fascists in each one shot. That's the game level. Right? So notice if I do stuff strategically, it's almost purest as the sea. Despite the enfeeblement and try to recruit me and because they can speak the language. They don't do that to horses by speaking horses' language and teach them lessons. And when they move and try to give a static, notice who does that. Should the level really sink to this low, or while they recruit us and try to provide us this soggishness? They had intimidated us to go as they direct. So they want us to be more of similar to them. And have we been Kobe? Maybe I'll ask Kobe O'Brien for this. Or Kobe O'Brien, or Kobe O'Brain. And what I do with the brains can be subject to whether will be more comparative, whether comparative more revealed at whether minor rather more revealed at the Holocaust to campus. If you don't do the standard, then it's odd. What is with that? It is such to importance. Notice that the Nazis place peace, the unique entities, which whether probable, whether that's wrong, which places peace to such low priority. Reason that yet can be practiced of probable for comparative, whether probable of suitable of benching or probably gives perhaps of surplus, whether reason whether probable whether compared whether reason whether perhaps whether money instead of whether reason whether mind or whether probable whether reason whether perhaps of whether reason whether rather whether reason and whether after perhaps of whether reason whether efforts of whether reason whether reason whether perhaps of whether reason there whether mind or rather probable for reason there adjacent whether reason there freeze whether freeze to go view reason there accountable whether free set was considered of. messages reach to better persons and probably whether to a maybe if a good person, and the reason whether so for what reason whether it comes quicker, whether quicker comes quicker, at what reason whether it comes quicker, for what reason whether it comes at quicker. To better persons, whether reason to better persons of probable to also sort of often whether reason whether it's probable to also to could be then much better. If otherwise, it's this mission client is probably in some sort of minor hideous. Whether reason whether cannibal as minor repronunciation of whether reason whether in some sort of minor hideous. There's hypocrisy. There's lies. Females are against vestige of this. I don't know why. It is to train Prince Charming. I could actually send them to prisons. Actually, nuke a few cities. They want this. A character have different whether reason whether, and a personnel have different phases. Some of the chief start cynical than whether reason whether minor rather of whether reason whether minor instead of whether first start sort of do some sort of nonsense and such desecration against pieces or not other places. And then later sort of does in comparative whether comparative sort of it does regret. Virtually disgusting freak shoot all 7 billion and burn entire villages. There is no villages around. I don't notice any villages. It's all some sort of cultist summons and stick a needle into the humans and boil them. They're more condemned to go. It's out of context. A massive amount of those freaks are going to help against. The other thing is going to enforce the call police, and what the police going to do? Try to execute our guys like these want to do to the next 10. These are what the last them want to do. Well, boil every single human alive and stick a needle into the Palestinian kids and turn up the temperature. A bunch of freaks is target against everyone. Subtly against peace, every victim, and the other dimension is even right. Just try to mismatch, smash stuff around. These are smashing against. These are smashing glasses. Hideousness, right? And that's all of a sudden it's all focus onto that topic of probable thoughts of the computer event. Marsnuber's lots of them vastly out there. It's kind of a problem system.
problem 那个，那你的那个 internet 上的人过来看看你是什么样子的你，你怎么对待你妈的 ？How do you treat your mom？ 来上的没厉害 ，but you are the evil。我该把你的咖啡豆关掉。你再这样子对待我，你不要再讲这种话。你拿到了以后，你做这个动作对我是极大的侮辱，你知道不知道你？你对我是极大的侮辱，你不要旁边不旁边。
我是想看一看。
你看着我，做这个动作干什么呢？你这做这个动作干什么？挑衅我什么？你挑衅我的 tolerant。你不要吃我任何东西，我告诉你听。这衣服，你不要，你贴在那里，不要下来，不要下来，你不允许下来，你就这样一直待在里面，一直待在里面，你不要下来，你不要下来，你不要喝，你不要吃。挑战我的。